The anime begins by showing a 37-year-old young man named Mikami Satoru who works as an ordinary contractor at a firm after he graduates from college. But even though Satoru has lived a perfect life with a well-paying job in a big company, he still doesn't have a girlfriend until now. That day Satoru met his junior named Tamura who was dating a girl named Sawatari Miho. Tamura invited Satoru to have lunch together while discussing the matter of their office work. But on the way to the restaurant, a robber suddenly appeared from the other side and ran towards them, holding a knife. Seeing that Tamura was about to be killed by the robber, Satoru moved quickly and immediately pushed Tamura's body so he could survive. However, that action actually made Satoru injured badly by a knife stab, and Satoru, who lost a lot of blood, began to lose consciousness. At the last moment, Satoru hears a voice from another world or isekai who magically grants him various powers based on all the last words he spoke. As a result, Satoru has various defensive strengths ranging from heat resistance, stab resistance, physical attack resistance, pain nullification, cold resistance, and attack powers such as predator skills to great sage skills. After Satoru died, he was reincarnated into the world of isekai where he transformed into a blind slime trapped in a rock cave. Satoru tries to adapt to his new body and the environment around him until he begins to understand the power he has after the god explains everything to him. In the cave, Satoru tries to survive by looting various plants in that place and turning them into medicine. He also absorbs a magic crystal stone in the cave until he accidentally falls into a lake and gets a new skill in the form of water pressure propulsion. After that, Satoru met a giant dragon named Veldora who could help him to have a vision on the condition that he had to accompany the dragon for a long time. Satoru agreed to the offer and the dragon gave him a magic perception skill that allowed him to see. After realizing the uniqueness and intelligence possessed by Satoru, Veldora then asked him how he got trapped in the cave. After hearing about the story of Satoru's reincarnation, Veldora then told about how he got trapped in the stone cave. Veldora had been attacked and defeated by an isekai hero who activated the immortal prison skill and locked up in the cave. Hearing that, Satoru then intends to unite their strength so that they can get out of the cave. After they unite their bodies and powers, they then baptize each other by giving them new names. Veldora named Satoru Rimuru Tempest, and Satoru named Veldora Tempest for Veldora. The news of Veldora's disappearance from the rock cave located within the great forest of Jura made the various kingdoms around the forest frightened and wary. One of the kingdoms affected by the news of Veldora's disappearance is the Bluemund Kingdom, which the Bluemund King leads with the guild master named Fuse. To overcome this crisis, Fuse then sent several adventurers to investigate the stone cave and find out where Veldora was. On the other hand, Rimuru, who has now received the power of Veldora, began to fight various monsters such as giant black snakes, armasaurs, black spiders to giant bats to get new skills. Shortly after Rimuru found the cave door, the three adventurers sent by Fuse suddenly opened the door and Rimuru took the opportunity to exit the cave. After successfully exiting the rock cave, Rimuru met a group of goblins who were about to attack him because they were frightened by his presence in the forest they inhabited. Rimuru tried to convince them that he wouldn't hurt them and started talking to them. After realizing that Rimuru was not a bad slime, the goblins then asked him for help to help them attack the direwolves who were destroying their forest. It turned out that the goblins asked Rimuru for help because he had an aura of immense power and believed that Rimuru could help them defeat the direwolves. The goblins also said they were willing to make Rimuru their leader if he succeeded in assisting them in getting rid of the direwolves. Rimuru then planned to help the goblins, starting by encouraging them, healing the goblins injured in the first attack, and devising a strategy for the next attack. That night, Rimuru confronted the direwolves who were about to attack the goblins and tried to approach them by diplomacy so that they could solve this problem without war. However, because the direwolf leader refused the offer, a fight between them was unavoidable and Rimuru started directing the goblins to shoot at the direwolves. As a result of the fight, several direwolves were injured and the direwolf leader was killed by the cutting string trap Rimuru had previously prepared. After that, Rimuru used his mimicry skill to transform into the direwolf leader and make all the remaining direwolves submit to him. Thus, the feud between the goblins and the direwolf was successfully resolved, and Rimuru managed to unite them into one group. The next day, Rimuru asked them their names, and the goblin chief replied that they didn't have names because magical creatures like them could communicate using telepathy. Hearing that, Rimuru took the initiative to give them names so he could be closer to them and call them more easily. Rimuru then named the goblin chief with the name Rigger and several other goblins with the names Gobta, Gobji, Gobze, Gonzo, and Haruna. After Rimuru gave the direwolf Alpha the name Ranga, he suddenly fell unconscious because he had used up too much energy. As it turned out, with Rimuru giving names to the goblins and direwolves, he had baptized them and gave them the ability to evolve to become stronger. After Rimuru woke up from his stupor, he announced some important rules for the direwolves and goblins. In that rule, he mentioned that they must not attack humans, they must not demean other races, and they must not kill their fellow group members. After conveying all the rules, Rimuru appointed Rigger to lead the goblin and direwolf group to establish a forest village. But they find it difficult to build buildings and infrastructure because the goblins and direwolves still don't have the ability and knowledge of building construction. Rigger then advised Rimuru to go to the Dwarfgone Kingdom and ask for help from the dwarves who have the expertise to build buildings and forge iron. After hearing Rigger's suggestion, Rimuru decided to go to the Dwarfgone Kingdom with Ranga, Gupta, Rigger and several other goblin members, while the other goblins and direwolf members would guard their village. In the middle of the journey, they rested for a while on the bank of the Amelia River to gather their energy. In the evening, Rimuru received information that the kingdom of Dwarfgone was led by a human king named Gazel who had created a liberal system in the kingdom. After arriving at the gates of the Dwarfgone Kingdom, Rimuru ordered Ranga and the others to wait in the forest while he and Gupta would enter the Dwarfgone Kingdom. While at the security check line, Rimuru got into a fight with two men and the fight caused chaos in the place. As a result, Rimuru and Gupta were captured by the Dwarfgone royal security officers and imprisoned in the royal prison. Inside the prison cell, Rimuru heard that an Armorosaurus monster was attacking the kingdom's borders, so he offered to help by giving some healing potions to treat the injured dwarves. The royal prison guard named Kaido also received the potion and decided to release Rimuru and Gupta because of the help Rimuru had given that saved 3 dwarfs in their kingdom. As a thank you, Kaido introduced Rimuru to a blacksmith named Kaijin so that he could ask him for help to build the village's infrastructure with the 3 dwarves whom Rimuru had saved. But Kaijin couldn't help Rimuru because he still had some duties from the royal minister named Festa to make sword weapons and collect crystal stones to make weapons. Hearing this, Rimuru then gave Kaijin a lump of crystal stone that he had previously taken from the rock cave in the hope that Kaijin would help him. He then helped Kaijin complete a weapon by copying the sword weapon that he had previously made. In the evening, Kaijin takes Rimuru to a tavern to drink and have fun while introducing him to a fortune-teller girl. The fortune-teller girl mentioned that Rimuru would meet a girl from another world in the future, and that girl would be his soulmate. In the middle of the party, Festa's minister suddenly appeared with an arrogant attitude while insulting Kaijin and Rimuru as lowly beings. Hearing Festa's words, Kaijin felt angry and immediately beat him until he was battered. As a result, Rimuru and Kaijin were detained in the royal prison to be tried before King Gazel the next day. While in prison custody, Kaijin and the 3 dwarves who worked for him decided to help Rimuru and came with him to the big forest village of Jura. On the next day, Rimuru and the others were in court before King Gazel to decide whether they would be punished or not. Festa cheated by bribing Kaijin's defense attorney to corner his position and make Kaijin look guilty in front of King Gazel. Fortunately, King Gazel, who had learned what had happened, decided to free Kaijin and the others. After Kaijin and the others left, King Gazel immediately scolded Minister Festa for slandering Rimuru, the person who had helped the Dwarfgone Kingdom with healing potions. Meanwhile, in the Blue Moon Kingdom, Fuse gets a report from 3 adventurers who had previously been sent to the Stone Cave, namely Kaval, Aaron, and Guido. After receiving a report from them, Fuse again sent them to investigate the Jura forest because Valdora could be hiding around the forest. When Kaval, Guido and Aaron are about to leave for the Jura forest, they meet a masked girl named Shizu who wants to join them. On the other hand, Rimuru and the others had returned to their village with the dwarves who had skills as a carpenter and a blacksmith. With their help, the goblins began learning the techniques to construct various infrastructures and buildings in their village. Village development became more effective because the goblins already had the skills, and the village became more widespread. While Rimuru was on patrol with Gupta, Rigger approached him and reported that some humans had infiltrated the Jura forest. It turned out that the people Rigger was referring to were 3 adventurers from the Blue Moon Kingdom who had previously been sent by Fuse, and a group of giant ant monsters was currently chasing them. After running quite a distance, Shizu suddenly stopped and immediately fought against the giant ant with the power of the fire sword until all the giant ants were killed. But when Shizu was off guard, a giant ant monster that was still alive suddenly attacked her from behind. Fortunately, Rimuru arrived just in time and immediately unleashed his powerful skill to save Shizu. Rimuru then invited Shizu and the 3 Blue Moon adventurers to rest in their village. While they were having lunch together, Rimuru asked where they had come from and their reason for coming to the Jura forest. Kaval then explained that they were adventurers from the Blue Moon Kingdom who were sent by the royal advisor to investigate the whereabouts of the dragon Veldora who had disappeared from the eternal prison. In the afternoon, Rimuru had a private conversation with Shizu because he believed that Shizu was the girl who had previously been predicted to be his soulmate. Rimuru explained to Shizu that he was a human who came from another world and reincarnated into slime in that world after he died saving someone. Hearing this, Shizu tells Rimuru that she is also a human from another world who was summoned to the world of Isekai during the night of the fireworks festival in Japan. This then made Rimuru worried because he knew that a human who came to the Isekai world as a result of the summoning ritual would have consequences as a curse from the great power they got. However, since Shizu didn't want to explain what the consequences would be to Rimuru, he also respected Shizu's choice. Seeing the sadness on Shizu's face, Rimuru tried to comfort her by showing some beautiful memories and scenery in Japan with his special powers. Shortly after, Rimuru was asked by Kaijin to return to the village while Shizu was still silent on the hill, remembering the terrifying process of the summoning ritual she had experienced in the past. The scene switches to the past to reveal Shizu's memories of the time the summoning ritual took place. In the human world, Shizu, or previously named Shizue Izawa, accidentally meets a demon lord named Leon Cromwell who has a fire spirit named Ifrit. Leon unites the fire spirit with Shizu's soul in a spirit summoning ceremony, and he uses Shizu as his weapon to defeat every enemy he faces. After some time, Shizu finally got a little girl as her new friend in the world of Isekai, but one day, she unknowingly attacked and killed the girl due to the influence of the fire spirit controlled by Leon. After Shizu realized that she had killed her friend, she felt so guilty and traumatized that she had nightmares every night. Back to the present, Shizu is getting more comfortable with Rimuru because she can share her feelings that she has been keeping to herself all this time. Rimuru said that Shizu could stay in the village as long as she wanted, but Shizu refused the offer because she wanted to find Leon's whereabouts, which had trapped her in the world of Isekai. Then when the three Bluemund adventurers were about to return to the kingdom, they invited Shizu to join them, but she refused, and suddenly, she felt pain. It turned out that the fire spirit had taken over Shizu's consciousness until she turned into a fire spirit figure and instantly destroyed several buildings in the Jura Forest village. Rimuru immediately asked Rigger to evacuate the goblins and Direwolf while he and the three Bluemund adventurers would try to fight the fire spirit controlling Shizu's body. At first, Rimuru had a hard time defeating the fire spirit, and he was surprised that the water knife attack did not affect the fire spirit. But after learning that Aaron's power can hurt the fire spirit, Rimuru immediately asks Aaron to attack him so that he can copy that power. After Rimuru asked Ranga to take all the Bluemund adventurers who had been injured by the fire explosion away from that place, Rimuru tried to attack the fire spirit alone with Iceland's strength. Even though the fire spirit had used the power of shadows and trapped Rimuru in extermination magic, he could still survive because he had an extreme heat resistance power. Then after seeing the fire spirit off guard, Rimuru used the opportunity to bind the fire spirit and devour him with the power of the predator's skill so that he was confined within his body. After the fight, Shizu was saved, and Rimuru took care of her, hoping she would recover. After Shizu came to her senses, she apologized to Rimuru because she had ruined Rimuru and the goblin's residence. Shizu then said that in the past, she had met a masked hero who had helped her to escape Leon's control, and before they parted, the hero gave his mask to her. After the hero disappears, Shizu begins an adventure to fight evil in the world of Isekai before she ends up teaching in the kingdom of Ingratia where summoned children from the human world are housed. Shizu realized that she would soon die because of the curse she got from the spirit summoning ritual, so she asked Rimuru to tell her his real name. Rimuru then told Shizu about his real name. He allowed Shizu to rest in his body and promised that he would find Leon. After Shizu died, Rimuru paid his last respects to her and used his predator's ability to save Shizu's body. On the next day, the Bluemund adventurers said goodbye to Rimuru and thanked Shizu. Elsewhere, an orc suddenly fainted from hunger and exhaustion, so a demon named Galmut christened the orc with the name Geld so that the orc transformed into a stronger creature to rule the Jura Forest. Meanwhile, Kaijin and the others started repairing the damaged buildings and continued other unfinished infrastructure development plans. On the other hand, the goblins and dwarves were getting used to Rimuru's human form, and they also started to involve Rimuru in various daily activities. That day, Rimuru ordered Ranga to escort Gopta and the other goblins who were about to hunt in the forest to protect them from the attacks of the beasts. Meanwhile, Rimuru will go into Veldura's cave to practice a new skill in the form of black fire and try to use Shizu's mask that can hide his powerful aura. Shortly after, Rimuru received an emergency signal from Ranga indicating that the goblins were in danger. Rimuru immediately went after them and found the goblins who had been injured from the attacks of the 6 ogres. After healing the injured goblins, Rimuru tried to approach the ogres to negotiate so there would be no pointless battle, but the ogre leaders refused to listen to him because they thought that Rimuru was the one who had sent a group of orcs to destroy their village. This was because Rimuru wore the same mask as the person who sent the orcs. After a very short battle, Rimuru could trounce them and decided to show his strength to the ogres so that they would be willing to consider his negotiation offer. The second battle was prevented after the ogre leader's younger sister persuaded the ogre leader to investigate who had sent the orcs to their village. After that, the ogres apologized to Rimuru and the goblins for having a bad attitude towards them. Before the ogre left, Rimuru invited them to have a drink together in the forest village of Jura while having a chat together. In the conversation, the ogres said that their village had been attacked by powerful orcs and controlled by a demon with enormous power. Hearing that, Rimuru advised the ogres to form an alliance with the goblins and join as his henchmen so that they would have shelter. The next day, after much deliberation, the ogre leader met Rimuru and decided to join his subordinates until they succeeded in taking revenge on the orcs. After hearing their sincerity, Rimuru then baptized the ogres with the names Sion, Hakuro, Sawe, Kurobe, Shuna, and appointed Benimaru as the leader. Meanwhile elsewhere, an army of orcs numbering in the thousands began to flock to the borders of the Lizardman Kingdom in the Lake Sis area. The Lizardmen's royal guards immediately informed the Lizardman King about the arrival of the orc troops heading to their territory. The Lizardman King then ordered his son named Gabiru to investigate what caused the orc army to come to their territory and overcome the orc army's invasion. At the same time, Rimuru received information from Benimaru and Sawe that there was a demon named Galmud who had come to their village to baptize the ogres. But Benimaru chased the demon away, so there is a possibility that the person behind all these incidents is the demon Galmud. Meanwhile, Gabiru, who has arrived in the middle of the Jura forest with his troops to gather more troops from the goblins, intends to come to the Jura forest village to conquer the village. But after Gabiru and his troops arrived at the village, they were easily defeated by Gopta, so they fled in fear. Rimuru then sent Sawe to investigate what was happening in the Lizardman Kingdom. From the investigation that Sawe had carried out, Rimuru finally got information that thousands of orc troops were coming to the territory of the Lizardman Kingdom. That night when Rimuru and the others were having a meeting, Sawe informed that there was a dryad who wanted to meet Rimuru. After the dryad appeared, she introduced herself as trainee and asked Rimuru to help defeat the orc army and a mighty orc lord. That night, Rimuru asked Sawe to meet the Lizardman King and tell the Lizardman army not to attack the orc army first, because the orc army could copy the attack abilities of the Lizardmen. On the other hand, Gabiru and his squad meet a demon disguised as a clown. The demon instigated Gabiru to stage a coup against the Lizardman King or Gabiru's own father. At the same time, Sawe had arrived at the Lizardman's kingdom and conveyed a message from Rimuru so that the Lizardmen troops would not attack and only use defensive strategies until help from Rimuru arrived. Although the members of the Lizardman kingdom initially refused it, after they saw Sawe's abilities, they decided to comply with the request and allied with Rimuru. Unfortunately, after Sawe left the Lizardman Kingdom, Gabiru came with his troops and immediately staged a coup d'etat on his own father. After successfully carrying out a coup, Gabiru and his troops prepared to attack the orc troops who would soon arrive in their territory. On the other hand, Rimuru and the others were ready to fight against the orcs and were on their way to the Lizardman Kingdom. On the way, Rimuru met the daughter of the Lizardman King, who was injured from fighting with the orc army alone. After healing the princess with a potion, Rimuru then asked the princess how the current condition of the Lizardmen was, and the princess replied that currently, Gabiru had staged a coup d'etat on their father. Hearing that, Rimuru was determined to be able to help the Lizardman King defeat the orc army and get his throne back in the Lizardman Kingdom. Gabiru and his army began to struggle to defeat the orc army after realizing that the orc army could wrest physical strength from the Lizardmen army. Moreover, Gabiru saw a giant orc general with a frightening aura, which definitely made him feel frightened at the thought of the orc lord's power. It turned out that Benimaru's previous guess was proven right, that the mastermind behind all this incident was the demon Galmud who was currently watching over the orc troops using a magic crystal ball from the middle of the Jura forest. Shortly after that, Dryad appeared and intended to kill Galmud, but unfortunately, Galmud and his subordinates managed to escape. Rimuru and the others finally arrived at the battlefield and they immediately rescued Gabiru who was getting exhausted after fighting against the giant orcs. After Gopta and Ranga save Gabiru, the ogres start fighting with their special abilities. Benimaru attacked with the power of black flames, Hakuro attacked with the power of the sword, and Sion attacked so brutally that they managed to slash the orc army by quite a large number. Ranga began to transform into a Tempest Direwolf so that he had the power of a deadly storm that could finish off the orc troops that surrounded the Lizardmen army. At the same time, Sawe had managed to save the Lizardman King and directly communicated with the demon Galmud to show the defeat of the orc army that had been sent by him. Galmud, who panicked because the defeat of the orc army in this battle could make the demon lord angry and punish him, immediately rushed to the battlefield to face Rimuru. When Galmud arrived at the battlefield, he grumbled in annoyance at Rimuru's troops while summoning the orc lord he had created earlier. Rimuru, without feeling the slightest fear, immediately approached Galmud and showed his power so great that it scared him. The Orc Lord named Geld then appears after Galmud and summons him to attack Rimuru. But unexpectedly, instead of attacking Rimuru, Geld killed Galmud and preyed on him out of hunger. After preying on the demon Galmud, Geld transformed from an Orc Lord into a very powerful Orc Disaster. The attacks from Rimuru's troops did not impact Geld because he could regenerate very quickly. Seeing that, Rimuru tried to attack Geld with a combination attack from several skills he had, but it still couldn't hurt him. Rimuru finally used his Predator skill to prey on Geld's body and strength, so Geld slowly began to lose power and was defeated. When Rimuru preyed on Geld, Rimuru had a vision of his past memory which showed a food crisis and famine so terrible in the Orc village that Rimuru promised Geld that he would take care of the Orc race and save them from starvation. After the battle, Rimuru held a meeting with his troops with the Orc group and the Lizardmen group. He explained that the Orc army did all that because of the famine that hit their village, so the Lizardmen would also forgive the Orcs. After that, Rimuru proposed the idea of allying with the goblins, ogres, lizardmen, and orcs into one group in an association called the Jura Great Forest Alliance. Then, the Dryad or Forest Elf overseeing the Great Forest of Jura then appointed Rimuru as the alliance's leader. After that, Rimuru baptized the loyal subordinate of Geld under the name Gerudo and appointed him as the new leader of the Orc nation. Rimuru has also succeeded in helping the Lizardman King reclaim his throne in the Lizardman Kingdom after Rimuru baptized the king with the name Abiru. After Abiru became king of the Lizardmen, Abiru expelled Gabiru and his troops as punishment for all the mistakes and coups committed by him before. Over time, Rimuru helped the Orcs rebuild and develop their village to be safer and more prosperous. A few days later, the army of the Dwarfgon Kingdom and the King of Gazel came to Rimuru's village after he received information about Rimuru, who had defeated Orc Disaster and built the Jura Great Forest Alliance. After having a short conversation, Gazel, who was initially worried about Rimuru's whereabouts, finally realized that Rimuru was not a bad person. In the evening, King Gazel invites Rimuru to cooperate between Rimuru's village and the Dwarfgon Kingdom. After considering a few things, Rimuru agreed to the offer and called their territory the Jura Tempest Federation, with Rimuru's village as the kingdom's capital. As a thank you, King Gazel handed Festa to Rimuru so that he could hire him as his subordinate because Festa had quite advanced scientific abilities. At the same time, Gabiru and his troops came to meet Rimuru and intend to join his men. Rimuru accepts them and orders them as Sawe's men after he baptizes them into the Dragonite army. Rimuru gave a special task to Gabiru and Festa to grow medicinal plants in Veldora's rock cave and conduct research in the laboratory located in the rock cave. On the other hand, the four demon lords gathered in a palace after they witnessed Rimuru's fight with Orc Disaster on the battlefield earlier. The four demon lords named Milim, Clayman, Frey, and Carrion are four of the 10 demon lords in the Isekai world. Milim, who was curious about Rimuru's power, came to the Jura Tempest Federation to meet him. After Rimuru saw Milim's behavior, which was very childish and could be easily distracted, he didn't feel anxious about her presence and started spending time with her. After the village leaders of the Jura Tempest Federation learned that Milim was one of the demon lords, they concluded that it was likely that another demon lord would come to their village. Meanwhile, in the Bluemoon Kingdom, Fuse and the Bluemoon King also received news about Rimuru's victory in the battle against Orc Disaster, so Fuse and his troops intend to visit Rimuru's village. Returning to the Jura village of Tempest, Rimuru began to dig up information about the other demon lords to Milim after the envoy of the demon king Carrion named Pobio came to their village. In addition to the Bluemoon Kingdom, another kingdom named Falmus also heard the news about Rimuru's victory and the Jura Kingdom alliance that Rimuru had formed. The Falmus royal envoy, led by a young man named Youm, also came to Rimuru's village at the same time as the Bluemoon royal envoy led by Fuse. After arriving at the village of Jura Tempest, Youm and Fuse then met Rimuru and the other village leaders of Jura Tempest to hold a meeting. In the meeting, Rimuru asked Youm to join the Jura Tempest Alliance and asked him to spread information about Rimuru's good intentions so that other kingdoms would not consider him a world threat. Youm, who had understood Rimuru's intentions, agreed to the request and decided to learn to fight with Rimuru's troops. On the other hand, the demon lord Clayman received news that the strongest monster named Charybdis would soon rise, and Clayman ordered his subordinate named Tyr to find a way to control Charybdis. After he learns that the envoy of the demon king Carrion named Pobio is planning to take revenge on Rimuru, he instigates Pobio to control Charybdis and use the monster's power to defeat Rimuru. After Tyr and Pobio arrived at the cave where Charybdis was, Tyr ordered Pobio to unite his soul with Charybdis' soul so that Charybdis could be resurrected. The next day, Dryad's younger sister, Toria, suddenly appeared before Rimuru. She gave the news that the monster of calamity named Charybdis had risen and the monster intended to attack the Jura forest. Hearing the precarious situation, Rimuru then held a meeting with the leaders of the Jura Forest Federation to devise a strategy in the fight against the monster Charybdis and the demon lords who controlled Charybdis. The battle between Rimuru's army and the evil demon king's army that controlled Charybdis was fierce the following day. Rimuru's army had difficulty defeating the evil demon lord's army and Charybdis because the enemy's strength was so great. Charybdis, who had the form of a megalodon, then issued a sharp-scale attack on Rimuru's troops. Fortunately, Rimuru could withstand the attack with his new skill called Gluttony. After Rimuru realized that Charybdis had the power of regeneration, he asked the army of Dwarfgon Nation to carry out continuous attacks to hinder Charybdis' regeneration while he analyzed it. After learning that Pobio is inside Charybdis' body and controlling Charybdis' body, Rimuru asks Milim to destroy Charybdis and save Pobio. After Milim managed to destroy Charybdis, Pobio came to his senses and apologized to Rimuru for this incident. He then informs that a demon lord has instigated him to resurrect Charybdis. After that, the demon lord Carrion suddenly appeared and thanked Rimuru for caring for his subordinate Pobio who had lost control. The next day, Rimuru decided to go to the Ingratia Kingdom with Ronga to find Shizu's disciples because he remembered the promise he had previously made to Shizu. After arriving in the Ingratia Kingdom, Rimuru came to the Freedom Guild headquarters to meet one of Shizu's students who had become Grandmaster named Yuki Kagura. After meeting with Yuki, Rimuru informs Yuki of his intentions that he wants to save Shizu's students from the Freedom Academy. With Yuki's help, Rimuru disguises himself as a teacher at the academy so he can approach Shizu's students. The next day when Rimuru was about to teach, Yuki told Rimuru about one of Shizu's students named Hinata Sekiguchi who had left the academy several years ago. In the classroom, Rimuru meets 5 Shizu students named Kenya Misaki, Ryota Sekiguchi, Gail Gibson, Alice Rondo, and Chloe Aubert. Because the students still underestimated and ignored him, Rimuru decided to take them one by one against him in turn. In all those battles, Rimuru won and asked them to listen to him because he was Shizu's best friend, who she sent to save them. Rimuru also intends to help them by connecting their souls with spirits, just as Shizu is connected to Ifrit's fire spirit. Thus he could free their souls as he freed Shizu from the Ifrit spirit earlier so that the children would not suffer the consequences of the deadly curse. After gathering information, Rimuru finally found a place inhabited by powerful spirits in the gems of the Ingratia Kingdom. Rimuru went there with Ronga and 5 of Shizu's disciples to find the spirit they were looking for. After entering the building, Rimuru used his mental map to pass through various extremely complicated rooms like a maze without getting lost. After a while, a mysterious voice was suddenly heard trying to communicate with them, and Rimuru said that they only wanted to get blessings from high-level spirits. Not long after, Rimuru and the others were brought to a room inhabited by a large robotic golem. Fortunately, Rimuru could easily defeat the robot golem and destroy the golem with the power of the black flames. After he threatened the spirit controlling the golem that he would unleash another black flame attack, the spirit suddenly appeared and introduced herself as one of the demon lords in Isekai named Ramirez. While the children are resting in Ronga's body, Rimuru has a short chat with Ramirez and she tells him that the demon lords in Isekai are actually great spirits but they turn into demon lords after a transgression or mistake. After that, Ramirez invited Rimuru and the others to go to a room where they could make a wish to a spirit. Through the request, all disciples get a relationship with different spirits based on their power. Gail gets the earth element spirit, Alice gets the space element spirit, Kenya gets the light spirit, Ryota gets the water and wind elemental spirit, and finally, Chloe gets a very rare and powerful fairy spirit in the form of a woman who somehow has a relationship with Veldora. Realizing that it was a very powerful spirit and difficult to control, Ramirez tried to prevent the woman's spirit from entering Chloe's body but she was too late. Ramirez explained to Rimuru that the spirit was a spirit that came from the future and had received protection from the spirit of the time. Still, Rimuru responded casually as long as the spirit did not harm Chloe. After gaining a spirit connection, Rimuru's protégés begin to live normal lives like him. Rimuru was relieved and happy that he had managed to keep his promise to Shizu to protect the students at the Freedom Academy. Before Rimuru returned to Jura Tempest, he gave Shizu's mask to Chloe and asked Yuki to look after the children while he went on an adventure. When Rimuru returned, the Jura Tempest village grew rapidly and evolved into a more modern city. On the other hand, the strongest demon lord known as Moir secretly keeps an eye on Rimuru because he is interested in becoming his servant. Moir feels sure that Rimuru will summon his spirit in the future because their destiny has been tied to each other. The anime continues with the story of Rimuru, who previously managed to save students from Shizu and help them discover the power of the elements. That day, Rimuru said goodbye to the students he loved because he had to return to the land of Jura Tempest and lead the government in that land. After teleporting to the land of Jura Tempest with Ranga, Rimuru wolf, which is very loyal, he looks proud because the land of Jura Tempest has developed into a more prosperous city. After that, Rimuru sent Rigger and Benimaru as representatives to do diplomacy with the kingdom of Eurozania led by a demon lord named Carrion. Before the delegates left for Eurozania, he advised Benimaru to avoid conflict and approach it well. After that, Rimuru and the others prepared to welcome the delegation's arrival from the kingdom of Eurozania by preparing a luxurious assembly hall and various delicious dishes made according to the recipe of Shuna, a female ogre who was good at cooking. A few days later, a delegation from Eurozania arrived and began to introduce themselves. The first delegate was a golden serpent woman named Albus, who was one of the high knights of the king of Carrion. The second delegate was the white tiger woman named Subia, who looked arrogant and insulted Rimuru as soon as she got off the carriage. This angered Sion, the female ogre who had always accompanied Rimuru, and immediately fought against them. However, as the battle grew fiercer, Albus immediately stopped the fight and said that Subia's provocation was only to test Rimuru's troops' abilities. She felt admired and admitted that she respected Rimuru for forming such a strong army and building a land as big as Jura Tempest. In the evening, the meeting between the delegation and Rimuru was lively with various delicious dishes and quality sake belonging to Jura Tempest. Albus then suggested that they work together so that agriculturally rich Eurozania would be allowed to send their grapes as raw material for the sake, and in exchange for them to receive an exclusive import contract for the sake commodity. A few days after holding several meetings, the delegation of Eurozania returned to their kingdom. As a result of this collaboration, the citizens of Eurozania were allowed to learn the techniques of blacksmithing and weaving clothes. The next day, Benimaru and Rigger returned to Jura Tempest after a diplomatic visit to the kingdom of Eurozania. In a meeting with Rimuru, Benimaru reported that the kingdom of Eurozania still didn't have any architectural construction techniques but had abundant agricultural resources of excellent quality. After the meeting, Benimaru asked Rimuru for permission to leave all diplomatic matters to Rigger so he could focus more on taking care of the military in Jura Tempest. Hearing his consideration, Rimuru immediately agreed to his suggestion and left the diplomatic affairs entirely to Rigger. The next day, Rimuru went to the Dwarfgon kingdom to pay a visit after they had not met King Gozel, who ruled the kingdom. He departed with Sion and Shuna and the two male goblins who always escorted him, namely Gobta and Gobzo. After arriving at the Dwarfgon kingdom, Rimuru was greeted by King Gozel's henchman named Gorf and immediately escorted to the balcony to meet King Gozel. At the meeting, he praised Rimuru and the land of Jura Tempest for defeating the Charybdis monster a while ago. Rimuru tried to be humble by saying they could win the battle because of the help of one of the demon queens, Milim. On the other hand, he also gave a gift to King Gozel in the form of the best quality sake made directly by the people of Jura Tempest. The next day, Rimuru gave a speech in front of the entire population of the Dwarfgon kingdom containing a message of gratitude because the kingdom had helped him develop the land of Jura Tempest that prioritized racial equality. On the other hand, Yam, the leader of the adventurer group from the Valmoth kingdom who has allied with the land of Jura Tempest, met a young woman named Mioran. Mioran says that she wants to join Yam's adventure group and says that she is good at using magic. Yam didn't believe it immediately, so he wanted to test her strength with a one-on-one duel. After a fairly short fight, he finally recognizes her abilities and is forced to accept her into his group. After being busy with various diplomatic and government affairs, Rimuru returns to the Ingratia kingdom to meet his students who have graduated past their last year at the academy. He also gifted each student with a complete collection of their favorite manga. As we know, he and all his students are humans who reincarnated into the isekai world, so it's no wonder they know manga and video games. On the other hand, Yam and his adventure group returned to the land of Jura Tempest to visit Rimuru. He introduced Mioran to Sion, Shuna, Benimaru, and the other higher-ups of Jura Tempest. After that, he invites Mioran to tour the city of Jura Tempest to see the routines of the residents and the various beautiful architectural buildings. Seeing the advancement of technology and the intelligence of the people of Jura Tempest, Mioran, who is actually a spy for the evil demon King Clayman, feels threatened. On the other hand, Rimuru, who was relaxing while drinking beer in one of the bars in Ingratia, suddenly remembered Milim because he had not seen her for a long time. Unbeknownst to Rimuru, Milim had now been hypnotized and controlled by the evil demon lord, Clayman. At the same time, the higher-ups of the Valmoth kingdom began planning to attack Jura Tempest because they thought that Jura Tempest's technological advances had hindered their trade. The king of the Valmoth kingdom named Adamaris and his royal advisor named Razin began to gather troops from the military forces, the followers of the Holy Church, and the 3 human knights who were Razin's subordinates. The 3 human beings are 2 boys named Shagu Taguchi and Kyoya Teshibana and a girl named Harara Mizutani. Meanwhile, Yam seemed to be relaxing with Mioran under a tree, and slowly their relationship became closer. She slowly falls in love with him and is confused about whether she will continue to help Clayman carry out his evil plan or betray him. She was also confused because Clayman was still holding her heart, so she couldn't do much to free herself from his bondage. On the other hand, Benimaru got information from their intel that the military forces of the Valmoth Kingdom were moving towards Jura Tempest. At the same time, he also received information from Albus that the kingdom of Eurozania would be fighting against the demon Queen Milim, who seemed to be being controlled by someone remotely. Meanwhile, 3 human knights sent by Razan, namely Shagu, Kioya, and Harara, arrived in Jura Tempest and started to create a commotion. Sion and Shuna, who can read minds, also know their evil plan and asked them to leave. Unfortunately, their words were ignored, resulting in a battle between them. Elsewhere, Mioran is forced to carry out Clayman's orders to create a magic barrier in Jura Tempest region so that the magic power of the creatures in that land can be reduced. In addition, the Holy Church troops from the Valmoth Kingdom had also arrived at the borders of Jura Tempest and issued a magic barrier that cut off Jura Tempest's connection with the outside world. Shuna, who could see the magic barrier, had a premonition that something bad would happen in Jura Tempest. It turned out that Clayman's plan to suppress the strength of the residents of Jura Tempest slowly began to take place, where Sion suddenly felt pain and her body suddenly weakened. On the other hand, Rimuru and Ranga, who were about to leave the Ingratia Kingdom and return to Jura Tempest, were suddenly unable to teleport there due to the magic barrier previously set up by the Sacred Church Army. Rimuru and Ranga also teleported into a cave near the forest of Jura Tempest so that they could arrive at the city of Jura Tempest faster. After arriving there, Rimuru saw one of his intel names show that the city of Jura Tempest had been attacked by the kingdom of Valmoth. Rimuru also orders Gabiru, a lizard demon under him, to guard the border of Jura Tempest with his troops. After he arrived at Jura Tempest, he was surprised by the appearance of the magic barrier and the state of the city of Jura Tempest, which had been destroyed. Not long after, Rimuru saw the fight between Benimaru and Yam, trying to protect Mioran. Yam begged Rimuru to forgive Mioran because he had learned she cast the barrier magic at Clayman's coercion. Mioran instead tried to provoke Rimuru by showing hundreds of residents of Jura Tempest who had died due to attacks from the Valmoth royal troops. Seeing his people lie lifeless, Rimuru felt very sad and angry that he was too late to protect them. Fortunately, he regained his composure and asked Mioran to explain what had happened in the meeting. At that meeting, Mioran reported that the Sacred Church troops helped the Valmoth Kingdom to attack Jura Tempest because they thought that human existence could be threatened by the existence of Jura Tempest. Hearing this, Rimuru asked for help from their neighboring kingdom, Blue Moon. After that, Rimuru gave Mioran a chance to explain why she cast barrier magic. She explains that all this time, the demon Lord Clayman had enslaved her and played her like a doll because he could kill her by destroying her heart that was already in his grasp. Hearing her explanation, Rimuru decided to keep her in prison until he found a solution to her problem. After the meeting, Rimuru realized that he had not seen Sion and Gobzo, so he asked Benimaru and the others about their whereabouts. He was forced to accept that they had died in the previous Valmoth army attack because they sacrificed themselves to protect the child and Gobta. Rimuru couldn't hold his tears anymore and asked everyone to leave him alone. Not long after, the knight from the Blue Moon Kingdom arrived in Jura Tempest, and the female knight named Aaron told him that she had heard of the Edo Tensei ritual that could resurrect the dead. Hearing this, Rimuru asked Aaron to explain it because he hoped he could save the dead people of Jura Tempest. After hearing Aaron's explanation about the demon Queen Milim being able to revive a dragon that was once his best friend, Rimuru is even more determined to become a demon lord and revive the people of Jura Tempest. After that, Rimuru met Mioran and decided that he would punish her with the death penalty for all her actions that put the people of Jura Tempest in danger. However, it turns out that he didn't actually kill her. Rimuru replaced the artificial heart in her body with a new heart because this heart had been Clayman's tool. After Mioran returns to life, she also thanks Rimuru for his generosity in forgiving her mistakes. After that, Rimuru tells Yam about his plan to massacre the entire Valmoth royal army, including King Valmoth, so he can become the demon lord. Thus, he wanted Yam to be the next king to lead the new Valmoth kingdom. He also asks Mioran for help to help him carry out the Edo Tensei ritual so that he can revive the people of Jura Tempest. In a meeting, Rimuru announced that he would try to become a demon lord so that he could perform the Edo Tensei ritual to revive the inhabitants of Jura Tempest. He also explained that he was actually a human reincarnated into a living slime in that world. Still, he already considered all the creatures in Jura Tempest like his own family. After Rimuru becomes a demon lord, he plans to create a peaceful world where humans and other races can coexist. Next, they began to discuss the strategy to deal with the Valmoth Kingdom's army and the Holy Church and how to overcome the barrier of magic in the sky of Jura Tempest. Rimuru ordered his troops to destroy the tools around the city of Jura Tempest. where the tools had been intentionally installed by the enemy to create barrier magic. Inimaru will destroy the tools in the east area, while Hakuro, Rigger, and the goblins will destroy the tools in the west area. Gabiru's stealth troops will take care of the southern area, while Jura Tempest Intel will be deployed to take care of the northern area. Shuna and Miron were specially assigned to create magic that could protect the residents of Jura Tempest. Aaron and the Blue Moon Kingdom Knights are also assigned to guard the two of them with Yam. Shortly after that, Rimmaru's troops began to carry out their respective duties. The Nimmaru, with the power of his magic sword, can easily defeat the enemy and destroy the magic tools that block the eastern area. Gabiru's army launched an attack from the sky so that they could defeat the enemy and destroy the magic barrier device at the same time. Jura Tempest Intelligence Squad, known to be very skilled at fighting, also managed to slaughter all the enemy troops with lightning movements. Meanwhile, Hakuro and the Goblin army will fight against the human knights that had been sent by Razan earlier. As the three human knights underestimated Rimmaru's army, they became arrogant and could easily be defeated by Hakuro and the others. When Geld is about to kill Shagu, Razan suddenly appears and saves him, so they manage to escape. After all of the enemy's barrier magic tools were defeated, Shuna and Miron immediately created a new protection portal so that the incident did not happen again. Now is the time for Rimmaru to show his true strength and slaughter the entire Valmuth Kingdom army and the Holy Church army mercilessly. He uses a move called Makido that can slay anyone with a fast katana of light from all directions. After successfully slaughtering the enemy troops, Rimmaru then absorbs all the human souls from the troops so that he can begin to transform into a demon lord. After the fight, he felt very sleepy, so he called Ranga to take him to a safer place. Before that, he summoned a demon named Koro to find one person pretending to be dead among the enemy troops and brought that person in front of him. After that, Rimmaru's transformation into a demon lord was completed, and now the humans and other creatures recognized him as the demon lord. On the other hand, Koro has managed to find Razan, who turns out to be pretending to be dead in Shagu's body, and Razan challenges Koro without realizing that he is a demon. In the end, Koro can easily dodge Razan's attacks and instantly knocks him out with one hit. Meanwhile, after Rimmaru turns into a demon lord, he begins to perform the Edo Tensei ritual to resurrect the dead inhabitants of Jura Place. Koro also helps him by giving him the magic power he has in the soul of the demon army so that he has enough power to revive the residents of Jura Tempest. The Edo Tensei process can run smoothly, and all the residents of Jura Place who have died have been successfully resurrected. A few days later, Rimmaru got the news that Milim had attacked Eurozania, so King Carrion asked him for help so that the inhabitants of Eurozania were allowed to take refuge in Jura Tempest. In addition, King Carrion also asked Rimmaru for help so that he and his troops helped them defeat Milim, who seemed to be getting stronger as if there was a magic power controlling her. While Rimmaru was relaxing on the evidence with Ranga, he decided to make Koro his subordinate and gave him a new name, Diablo. After that, he got the news that Veldora's eternal prison had been successfully opened, so Rimmaru immediately rushed to the stone cave to get Veldora out. Veldora then transformed into a large burly man who possessed extraordinary strength after Rimmaru turned into a demon lord. Just as he introduced Veldora to his troops, a forest elf appeared and knelt in front of Veldora while revealing his true identity. After learning that the burly man in front of them was the dragon Veldora, the entire population of Jura Tempest knelt down and paid their respects to him. After that, Rimmaru and the residents of Jura Tempest also celebrated the release of the dragon Veldora from the eternal prison. At the next meeting, Rimmaru introduced Diablo as his personal secretary to help Sion. He then informed them that their next plan was to defeat Clayman, who had invaded the kingdom of Eurozania by controlling Milim. He orders Rigger to keep an eye on the remaining Western Holy Church troops while Sion and Yam will be assigned to interrogate King Adamaris. In the middle of the meeting, King Gazel and his army came to Jura Tempest to congratulate Rimmaru on turning into a demon lord. Besides King Gazel, he also had a guest from the representative of the Elf Kingdom named Alalad, who is the father of Aaron. On the other hand, one of Rimmaru's protégés, Yuki, has apparently teamed up with a former demon lord named Kazarium and a clown named Laplace to attack the troops of the Western Holy Church. However, their attack was thwarted by a vampire who was considered the embodiment of a demon lord named Valentine. After their plan failed, Kazarium planned to hold a demon lord party commonly referred to as Walpurgis that could help them infiltrate the Western Holy Church freely. Back in Jura Tempest, Rimmaru met with the kings or representatives from various kingdoms, such as King Gazel from the Dwarfgon Kingdom, King Alalad from the Elf Kingdom, and King Fuse from the Blue Moon Kingdom, and Yam as representatives of the Valmuth Kingdom. When Veldora appeared and introduced himself in front of them, King Gazel and King Fuse looked surprised at his appearance. After that, Rimmaru continued the meeting by informing them that he had previously fought with Hinata Sakaguchi from the Western Holy Church. Hearing that, King Gazel informed Rimmaru that Hinata's possibility of attacking was due to the Western Holy Church's teachings, which considered monsters a threat to mankind. After that, Rimuru planned to use Veldora to cultivate a good image in the neighboring countries, and he immediately agreed. Soon after, one of the demon queens named Ramiri came to Rimuru and told him there would soon be a Walpurgis meeting. She explains to him that Walpurgis is a gathering and tea party among demon lords worldwide. The demon lord who proposed Walpurgis this time was Clayman's alliance, consisting of Clayman, Milim, and Frey, another demon queen like Milim. In this Walpurgis meeting, Clayman proposed the topic of the destruction of Jura Tempest and the rumors about Rimuru having killed Mioran. Hearing that, Rimuru frankly told Ramiri that the mastermind behind all this chaos was Clayman, while pointing out that Mioran was still alive. Hearing that Rimuru was innocent, Ramiri promised she would support him later in the Walpurgis meeting. During the meeting, Rimuru ordered Diablo and Yam to take King Adamaris as prisoners so that it would be easier for them to take control of the Valmoth kingdom. Not long after, Jura Tempest's spy squad arrived and informed Rimuru that a very strong warrior among Clayman's troops was named Yamza. Hearing this, he must immediately find a solution to help the Eurozani kingdom defeat the Clayman troops in other areas. Rimuru felt that Clayman intended to massacre the inhabitants of the kingdom of Eurozania to increase his power as the strongest demon lord. The next day, Rimuru announced that he would use the power of teleportation so that the entire army of Jura Tempest could arrive at Eurozania on time. Later that evening, Rimuru held a meeting with the higher-ups of Jura Tempest to discuss the Walpurgis meeting. At that meeting, he agreed to bring Sion and Ranga to accompany him to the meeting later. The scene switches to a city called Dragon City, which is currently Milim's territory and is led by a man named Midray. That night, Midray was very upset with Clayman and Yamza's troops who abused them. Midray and the 30,000 troops he brought had taken almost half of the Midray army's food supply. Even Yamza suddenly slashes the right hand of Midray's subordinate named Hermes just because he had said something wrong. Fortunately, after Yamza left with the remaining food supplies, Midray could heal Hermes' hand with his healing powers. The scene goes back to Rimuru, who got the idea to move the refugees of Eurozania to a safer place away from the fighting area of the Clayman troops. The next day, Rimuru dispatched the combined forces of Jura Tempest and Eurozania, consisting of the Lycan army, the Goblin army led by Gobta, the Ogre army led by Benimaru, the Hobgoblin army, the Orc army, the Dragonite army led by Gabiru, and 20,000 other soldiers. Meanwhile, Sion and the Edo Tensei troops are assigned to guard Jura Tempest and secure its borders. After giving several motivational exclamations, Rimuru sent the entire fighting force to Eurozania using teleportation. Afterward, Benimaru told Rimuru that their troops had arrived in Eurozania and were ready to fight. Hearing that, Rimuru immediately dispatched Shuna, Hakuro, and Jura Tempest spies to attack Clayman's castle when he left for the war later. That night, the war between the combined forces of Jura Tempest against Clayman's troops began. Benimaru watched from the top of the cliff after seeing that part of Clayman's army had already fallen into the trap they had prepared. After the entire Clayman army fell into the trap, Geld's army in full armor began slaughtering them mercilessly, followed by the Dragonite army that attacked from the air and the Goblin army that attacked from both sides, so the Clayman army had no chance to escape. After that, Benimaru ordered Albus and Subia to attack the enemy's leader, who was none other than Midray. On the other hand, Yamza, who realized that Clayman's army had been defeated, intended to run away. But in the middle of the journey, Albus immediately attacked Yamza and the other leaders of the Clayman army with various sword attacks. In another place, Subia and Gabiru also fought against Midray and Hermes with all their strength because their strength was very strong. As it turned out, their strength came from their genetic race, which came from the human and dragon races. The scene switches to Albus fighting against Yamza in a fierce battle. Although Yamza uses the power of a doppelganger that can create a twin with the same power as him, Albus can easily overcome that after she transforms into snake stealth mode, forcing him to give up. However, when Yamza is about to give up, Clayman, with the magical power of Marionette, forces him to eat a magic pearl that turns him into a monster. Fortunately, Benimaru, who knew about it, immediately helped Albus to kill the monster with the power of Hellfire. Unexpectedly, Benimaru could defeat such a big monster in a short time with his sword skills. He also helped Subia overcome Midray, not by fighting but by making peace. It turned out that they had met and knew each other as Milim and Rimuru's subordinates. After a fairly long battle, the combined forces of Jura Tempest and Eurozania finally managed to defeat Clayman's army in a landslide. Meanwhile, Rimuru prepared to go to the Walpurgis meeting by asking Ramiris for the names of the demon lords. Ramiris informed that at the meeting later, the upcoming demon king and queen would include Milim, Frey, Clayman, Carrion, Leon Cromwell, Dogrule, Guy Crimson, Nino, and the vampire demon queen named Valentine. After memorizing all the names of the demon king and queen, Rimuru went with Sion and Ranga after meeting Guy's messenger, Misery. At the same time, Hakuro and the others also went to Clayman's castle to carry out their plan of destroying it. On the way, Shuna met an undead creature named Ottoman, who was trapped in the land of death due to a curse from the demon king Kazarium. Hearing that, Shuna helped Ottoman free from the curse using the holy magic power she controlled. As a thank you, he intends to join her as a follower of the lord she serves and help her to destroy Clayman's castle. On the other hand, Rimuru and Ramiris had arrived at the Walpurgis meeting and met another demon lord who looked very strong. The last demon lords to come were Clayman and Milim, which somehow annoyed Rimuru because he treated Milim like a slave. Rimuru started to realize that Milim had been controlled by Clayman with the magic he used on Mioran, which was marionette magic. In addition, Rimuru had known Milim several years ago and had become friends with her, so he was convinced that she couldn't possibly attack Eurozania just like that. When the Walpurgis meeting begins, Clayman continues to corner Rimuru by saying that he killed Clayman's subordinate, Mioran, and destroyed the Valmoth kingdom. Rimuru tried to refute all of his accusations by pointing out that Clayman had used Mioran and Yamza for his own interests. However, because Clayman continued to dodge, Rimuru immediately smashed the table and said that he had used some magic to control other people so that he could carry out his evil plan. The debate between Clayman and Rimuru was heating up so much. Then, the fight between Rimuru and Sion against Clayman and Milim was unavoidable. Sion and Ramiris men would fight against Clayman while Rimuru would try to free Milim from mind control magic. When Rimuru was about to be crushed by Milim's immense power, Veldora appeared to protect and help him. But when Veldora was about to tell him that Milim wasn't actually controlled by anyone, he left Veldoran to help Sion defeat Clayman. When Clayman is getting cornered, he tries to summon Frey and Milim to help him kill Rimuru. However, it turned out that they had never been controlled by Clayman, so Milim had refused his orders. After Sion managed to slash Clayman's body and defeat him, Guy immediately praised Rimuru's ability and his troops. However, as it turned out, Clayman could still sway with much greater strength, so Rimuru had to face him. He also uses the barrier magic power he learned from Guy to finish off Clayman and immediately ends his life with the slime power that can absorb enemy power. Before Clayman was completely wiped out, Rimuru asked him who the real mastermind had been helping him all this time. Clayman, who almost died, shouted for help from the demon lord Kazarium to help him, but no one was able to save him. After that, Guy, as the Walpurgis meeting leader, decided to honor Rimuru to name the Demon King Association. He suggested the name of the Great Eight Demon King Association as Octogram. The next day after Rimuru came home from the Walpurgis meeting, the entire population of Jura Tempest celebrated him for joining the Octogram Demon Lord Association. They also celebrate their victory in defeating the evil demon, Clayman. The moral that can be learned from this anime is to have a sense of empathy for others and a sense of protecting each other to live side by side in peace.